Hey everybody, welcome back to Tim Travels. It's Terry, your host. So today we're going to answer the oft asked but seldom replied to question about why is this channel called Tim Travels when my name is Terry. But before we get to that, couple of items. So B and I are here at the terminal in Pittston, PA. We had a load we dropped, actually didn't drop, got unloaded at Walmart down the road last night. Took a little while, and I'm going to talk about detention also in a minute. But then I kind of just went and found a place to park, and then I drove up here to Pittston this morning. I rejected actually 2 loads, one going to Florida because it's a COVID hotspot, and actually I don't like going to Florida anyway, so it was just a good excuse, really. I've only ever been there once in a truck. And I think I told this story before. I just went to the freaking intermodal yard, the FEC's intermodal yard, dropped a trailer beside a train, and then picked up a trailer and left. Yeah, I'm not a fan of driving into Florida. It's just not a place I like going anyway. So, and then I rejected a load out of Hershey because the candy loads are the ones that take forever. So I got a load picking up tonight in Selinsgrove, PA, and it's just going up to Schenectady. Hopefully that's going. Hopefully that'll go better than the last load I took to this location, which was a candy load, and they took like 6 hours to not count it, and then I finally got to leave. So productive day though. Came to the terminal, got some breakfast, got a shower, got the trailer I had on my back had a I got a message that the refrigeration unit, or at least the computer that sends info out, was not sensing the fuel level in the trailer. I mean, I'm pretty good about keeping an eye on that stuff. Anytime I'm stopped, I check my temps, I check my fuel level in the trailer, because that's a big no-no to let it run out of fuel or have some other problem. So I'm pretty good about that. So I just said, hey, I'm gonna get unloaded here shortly. But I'll bring the trailer to Pittston. So they earmarked that for repair. But then they said, oh, hey, you got a PM coming up on your truck. You only got like 1,600 miles left on the oil that you have in it. So called the shop. They got me in right away. I was in and out in an hour. So, I've talked about good shops and bad shops in the past. GP Transco has a really good shop, and Prime shops are, for the most part, my experience has been really good. Even when it's something that's not in their control, like I needed a part for my APU when I was in Salt Lake City, they work hard to try to get you taken care of. When I was at night, I never went to the inbound lanes and at the shops, at the terminals, unless it was an absolute necessity. At Prime, you don't really have a choice. But the good thing about it is that at Prime, it's like pulling into a NASCAR pit. I mean, these guys know exactly what they're looking for, exactly what they should be concerned with. If you need trailer tires, by the time you've shut your engine off, there's some dude that's already loosening the lug nuts and got a jack under your trailer. And I've had gone into shops where like 3 out of the 4 tires needed changed. And to be honest with you, sometimes I'm not even sure what they're looking at, because I'm like, oh, that'll pass the DOT inspection. But it's nice to know that they're on top of stuff. They're like, one time I had an empty trailer and they were doing an inspection, and I didn't see this. I had looked inside the trailer, but I didn't walk the whole length of it inside. And apparently somebody at a Walmart or Sam's Club, either a DC or a store, had drawn a penis on the inside of one of my trailers up towards the front. I didn't, you know, so they were like, oh, hey, we're gonna clean this up and stuff. So guys in the inbound lanes, outbound lanes are usually very efficient, and they're pros. They get stuff, you know, if you need fuel, whatever it is, they're really good at that. And the shops are good. Even when I had a loaded trailer that had to go in for like some, what do they call it? A program, I think. I had that trailer in the shop in Salt Lake City, and they were super fast. And I've gotten to know some of the people in the shop out there, and they're all, you know, top flight. So it's a benefit it's a benefit of being a prime. So anyway, enough about that for now. You know what I wanted to say, and you can call this a rant, you can call it whatever you want, but I am so proud of Simone Biles. This doesn't have anything to do with trucking. It just has to do with being an American, being a father of adopted kids, being a father of an African-American girl, adopted African-American girl that was in gymnastics but got too tall, and so now she's doing pole vaulting. But you know, Simone Biles is still the GOAT, and what she did at the Olympics was courageous, and it was important. And I think that I think we often do not consider the mental health needs of athletes, especially young athletes. And I'm going to tell you a quick story about the pressure that's on these young athletes, you know, especially at that level, but even at the collegiate level. You know, I was a company chief at the Naval Academy, and so I had a company of about 140, 136 midshipmen. And a lot of those midshipmen are recruited varsity athletes. Now, sure, some guys are, you know, like star football players or, you know, in well-known sports, but other people come that are like on crew, heavyweight or lightweight crew, or I had one guy that came to the academy as a recruited fencer. Fencing is an Olympic sport. However, at some point during his time there, they did away with the fencing team. But I had people that were competitive shooters. I had people that were, you know, volleyball, gymnastics, swimming, offshore sailing, you name it. And golf team. And they're all NCAA athletes, you know, competing at high levels. You know, when I was there, our basketball team got into the big dance, the NCAA tournament. But you know, Navy football has been pretty good for quite a while. And but anyway, I had this gal come into my office, midshipman I should call her, because that's what she was, and she was a plebe, so she was in her freshman year. And you know, I could see she was a little upset, and she's like, "Hey Chief, can I talk to you?" And I said, "Sure, come on in." I said, "Have a seat." And I said, "What's up?" And you know, like I said, I could tell she's been crying, and she said, "Chief, I don't want to swim anymore." Now the backstory here is that she was a recruited varsity swimmer, so she was a very good swimmer. As you can imagine, the Naval, well, probably all the service academies, but certainly the Naval Academy has really good, you know, like water polo, swimming, diving teams. And so I looked at her, and because I'm kind of a joker, and I'm like, and I said her name, Miss So-and-so, and I said, "Miss So-and-so, know we're in the Navy, right? Like, we got to swim. And she just kind of chuckled a little bit through the tears. And I said, but I knew what she meant because she was on the swimming team. And I said, okay, why? And she said, I've been swimming every day since I was 5 years old. And when she says every day, that is likely not an exaggeration. And she certainly probably averaged one training session a day, because a lot of times she would have been doing 2 or maybe even 3. I had a son that, well, actually I had 3 kids that swam competitively, but one was on both a high school team and a club team at the same time. And he wasn't even really like super awesome at it and really into it and looking for scholarships or anything. He just swam because he liked to swim and liked the team. But I mean, what they do is insane. I've seen parents take their kids from one swim meet, and as soon as that kid's events were over, leave to go to drive like 8 hours so overnight so they could be at another swim meet, and you know, in another state. I mean, it's that intense. And that's the level that all of these people, you know, you see like a Katie Ledecky or a Simone Biles, you know, just translate that to gymnastics, right? That's what it's like for all of them. I've known people that played, you know, like basketball at ACC schools. I've known people that certainly played football at ACC schools, Big Ten schools, Notre Dame, you know, a lot of big schools. And it's beyond what most people can imagine. And so I'm very proud of all the athletes, especially the women athletes who have stood up for themselves and accounted themselves well. And let me say this about, I can't remember her last name, Shikari, the sprinter who was not able to participate because she used the one performance enhancing drug that gets everybody. Yeah, marijuana. Yeah, she used that performance enhancing marijuana because I guess she was also going to enter the pie eating contest after the sprints she was running. That was BS. You know, if it's so performance enhancing, why can't truck drivers use it? Because it's not, right? It's just bullshit. Anyway, that's my rant on that. But like I said, I'm very proud of Simone Biles and all of the Olympic athletes who've overcome a lot and sacrificed a lot to represent their country. And you know, a lot of them never end up being famous or well-known or anything. They're known in their sport, but that's about it. And the vast majority of them don't cash in on that. Maybe they get a coaching gig somewhere, but you know, they're not going to cash in like a lot of these young women, or like a lot of professional athletes can. Okay, so let's get to the subjects at hand today. Why is this called Tim Travels? I actually answered this question on a live show that I did with Lyle from No Hippie Trucking and Transportation, probably back in May. But if you didn't see his live show, or you know, you don't watch his channel, then you wouldn't have seen this, because somebody asked me then. So here's how Tim Travels came about. Years ago, we're talking probably 16, 18 years ago, my wife did in-home daycare, and she had this little boy that she was doing daycare for. And when my wife would, like, and so I came home from work, and some of the daycare kids were still there. And the way my wife always introduced adults was she would call them Miss or Mr. and then their first name. So when she introduced me to this little boy, because, you know, he's been at the house for several hours, he hasn't seen me, and I walk in, right? Like, so she's introducing me and kind of telling me, oh, this is so-and-so's dad, right? So he makes this connection. She says, hey, And she says his name, and she's like, "This is Mr. Terry." And the boy looks up at me, and without missing a beat or saying anything else, he's like, "Hi, Tim." And you know, we're like, "No, Terry, this is Mr. Terry." And he's like, "Okay." And then every subsequent time I saw this kid, and it actually kind of got under my skin at first. It kind of bugged me that he was like I didn't know what was going on because I couldn't figure it out. He would call me Tim every time, and he wouldn't even call me Mr. Tim. He'd just call me Tim. So years go by, and then, you know, as I'm out and about with family, with the kids, invariably we'd go into a restaurant or fast food place, and they'd say, you know, can I get a name with the order? And I would just be like, Tim. And my kids would be like, "Dad, why don't you just give them your real name?" I'm like, "No, that's like my nom de cuisine, right? Like, that's my food name." And so even at places like, let's say, Longhorn, when they're like, "Hey, can I get in?" You know, we'd be like, "Oh, hey, we need a table for 8 or whatever." And they're like, "Oh, can I get a name for that?" And I'm like, "Yeah, Tim." And so that just continued, and continues to this day. And so that's where Tim Travels comes from, because whenever we were out, I would just say Tim. Because a lot of times when I say Terry, people are like Larry, Perry, Gary, and in fact, when I have to give my actual name, like at a ship or whatever, they say, "What's your name?" And I'll say Terry, like Terry Cloth. That's how this all came about. So yeah, I guess I don't enunciate well enough, so now I always say Terry Cloth, you know, so they know it's what it is. And they sometimes still spell it wrong. I also, if somebody looks like they have a football, you know, they like football, or they have a jersey on or something like that, I'm like, and every once in a while I would say, "Well, Terry, like, if you like the Steelers, like Terry Bradshaw." And everybody knows who Terry Bradshaw is because he's kind of cool. So anyway, that's a story on Tim Travels. One other thing that I was asked about is detention, because you know, I commented about being at this receiver for 8 hours. So here's the deal with detention. If you're a company driver, like when I was at GP Transco, they would just pay detention automatically. You didn't have to ask for it. They would just, once you hit that mark, and I never pay a lot of attention to what the mark, you know, what the benchmark is, but once you hit it, you get detention. As a contractor, we don't get detention unless the customer pays the detention. Now, because we don't get the full amount of detention, at least I don't think we do, it's also in Prime's interest to try to collect on detention. However, my goal is, you know, like some people, like I mentioned Lyle from No Hippie Trucking and Transportation, he likes collecting detention. He admitted to me, because I was asking him about it on the phone, he admitted to me he doesn't even track it. He doesn't pay any attention. He just hopes he gets it, right? And I mean, that's fine. I, on the other hand, would prefer not to have to worry about getting it and just get in and out and be back on the road. That's my mindset. But when it does happen, I don't freak out about it. I just deal with it. I go in the sleeper berth and I just, you know, start my rest break. So sometimes, even if you didn't get paid for it, it actually works out, because you, like yesterday, my 14-hour clock, I was at Walmart for several hours, even though I got there early, hoping to get unloaded early. You know, it took like 3.5 hours. So, you know, from the time I backed in the dock and got disconnected from the trailer and everything, I just went in the sleeper berth. And then I was out of hours. So when I left, I just PC'd, and even though I didn't get back on the road exactly at 10 hours because I didn't need to, I was just coming up here to the terminal, I could have. And so sometimes it's even advantageous that way, because you know, if you didn't get detained, then you would have hours left on your clock. And if you're under dispatch and you kind of head in the direction you would need to go to do your next load, you probably shouldn't be using personal conveyance. But when you're completely out of time, you don't have a choice, right? You can just say, hey, shipper, receiver, whatever it is, says I got to leave their property. I'm going to, and the statute says nearby. There's three prongs: nearby, safe, reasonable parking. The statute doesn't define any of those. So what constitutes nearby, safe, and reasonable is kind of up to you, although companies have their own guidance. So that's kind of the deal with detention. If I get paid for it, it's great. I don't often get detained so long that I really care that much. Every once in a while I get, like the other night up towards Chicago, I got detained for a long time, but then I still really didn't need to drive. So that was kind of bull crap, and I hope that I get paid for it. But detention issues, without regard to whether or not I get paid for it, will often make me want to decline a load. And you know, again, that's just philosophical. I'm not saying it's how other people do it is right or wrong. I'm just telling you what I do, and it's part of the business. But just in closing, let me say this: the federal government is actually talking about having a governmental standard for detention, basically saying to anybody that detains any truck driver for loading or unloading that, hey, once it hits this, you must pay this. Because some places just won't pay, but other places will. And so the federal government's talking about standardizing it and saying you have to pay, because truck drivers have said, hey, it's uncompensated time. But carriers are saying to the government, well, how are we going to compensate somebody when we're not being compensated? You know, it's like, you know, is it fair to us? So it's interesting that the carriers may be the ones who actually are supporting more regulation. Although I think it would be ultimately beneficial to drivers, because then it wouldn't be as much brain damage. It would just be like, hey, I got hours service clock, I logged at the facility at this time, and I didn't get to leave till this time. It hit the threshold, now you pay me, right? It's statutory. So I don't know how everybody feels about that. I'm kind of on the fence, because I could see where it could be beneficial, but also it could actually shortchange us in the long run. But that would require me tracking over a period of time to really see what it looks like, what my detention pay looks like. Anyway, thanks for tuning in. Thanks for watching, and be safe, and we will catch you next time on Tim Travels. Bye.